Hello students, welcome to our newest series of Environment and Ecology. I am Shashwat Chopra and I will be your instructor for the course. So let us start. At first, we'll be looking at the various international agreements, be it the Paris Agreement, be it the Kyoto Protocol, be it the 1972 Stockholm Conference. Why did these agreements happen? What led to the various policies of environment and international level? How did they came through? We'll be looking at all that. So first, let us start with the brief timeline of what events happened, how did they happen. Now, the first event which we'll be considering is 1972 Stockholm Conference. So one may say that there are various events which may have happened before that, but this is considered as the anchor point of our environmental studies as far as our examinations are concerned, because after this conference, many of the policies emerged, climate change and environment came into the limelight in international arena. So we'll be starting with the 1972 Stockholm Conference, the first conference in our timeline. So what is the importance of this 1972 Stockholm Conference? First, we'll be looking in brief. Then in upcoming lectures, we'll be looking in detail. So first thing which happened was that since this happened on 5th June, so World Environment Day is now celebrated on 5th June because this conference happened on 5th. One more thing was that United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, was established in this conference, UNEP. One more thing was that our then Prime Minister, Srimati Indira Gandhi, I'm writing as IG, participated in this conference. And due to this, various environmental laws emerged in India, such as Wildlife Protection Act, be it the Environment Protection Act, and various other laws came in India were drafted. One more thing happened was that forest was moved into concurrent list. Forest was moved into concurrent list in our constitution. So these were some of the effects of Indira Gandhi participating in this conference. One thing that you should know, this is very important, that the main focus of this conference was environment and not as such climate change. Climate change was not the main focus. Okay, at that time, climate change was just emerging as a new topic. So today, when we talk about environment, we talk about climate change as such in it. But at that time, environment was the main focus and climate change was not a big issue. People were not aware about it. So this I've talked about in brief. We'll be looking about this conference in detail in upcoming lectures. So now let us move on to the next conference, that is 1979 World Climate Conference. Okay. So this 1979 World Climate Conference, what happened was that it led to the study of various climate systems. Okay. People began studying the various climate systems which are present on Earth and how do they interact with each other, what effects humans are causing on them, and all those studies were beginning to carry out after this World Climate Conference. And due to this, in 1988, IPCC, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was established, which we will be seeing. Okay, this was the effect of World Climate Conference. It led to study of various climate systems, or the understanding, you may say that study / understanding, you can write study / understanding of various climate systems. Okay, and 1988 IPCC was established due to this. Then we have Brundtland Commission. This led to sustainable development in 1983. Now, why is this commission named as Brundtland Commission? This was named after the then Prime Minister of Norway, Mrs. Brundtland. Okay, she was the head of this conference. Now, why is this important? Because it led to the concept of sustainable development. Now, what is this sustainable development and why is this very important? Now, before the sustainable development came into picture, what was happening was that there was a debate that if we focus on environment, then development will suffer. But if we focus on development, then environment will suffer. So there was a constant debate on how we can achieve certain amount of development without harming environment. And this was especially very true for the developing countries, because at that time many countries had just achieved their independence. Okay, they were developing in their phase. So how can they achieve their development without harming much of the environment? This was very important. So this conference gave the concept of sustainable development. So what this sustainable development says is that you develop in such a manner that you protect the environment also, you protect environment, and you also, plus you protect environment, you also protect the resources for future generations. So you protect the earth so that future generations also have their needs fulfilled, not only present but also future generation. So this was the concept of sustainable development, and now from hence all the development had to be sustainable such that the earth can bear with such development and that future generations do not feel the pinch due to the needs of current generation. All the development had to be sustainable, and this is why this conference is very important, because it gave the concept of sustainable development. It did not put an end, but it somehow tried to solve the issue of development versus environment up to a large extent. That is why it is important. We'll be seeing about all the conferences in detail. I'm telling this in brief right now. Then in 1988, IPCC, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was established. Now this IPCC is again a very important body, you may say, because this IPCC releases assessment reports, various assessment reports it releases. We'll be seeing this in detail about climate change. It releases various assessment reports on climate change, and these assessments report form the bedrock of many research which are happening on climate change. One more thing that you should know, that this IPCC has been established by UNEP, and this UNEP was formed here in 1972, I've already told you, plus WMO, World Meteorological Organization. So this IPCC have been established by these two bodies. Okay, UNEP plus WMO. Okay, and this mostly carries out research. It mostly carries out research. This is more or less about IPCC. Then comes a very important summit, 1992 Rio Earth Summit, in which UNFCCC was signed. So now what is 1992 Rio Earth Summit? Why is this important? Now what was happening is that from 20th century we were going to 21st century. Okay, 21st century means the year 2000. From 1900 we are moving towards 2000. So now it occurred that in 21st century we have to do something about the environment. In 21st century we have to do something about environment, and that is why this Rio Earth Summit was organized. So to do something for environment in 21st century, to protect environment in 21st century, and hence you will study that an agenda 21 was also a part of Rio Earth Summit. And this agenda 21 is nothing but steps that we should take, steps to be taken to protect environment in 21st century. Steps to be taken to protect environment in 21st century is the agenda 21. Okay, this is very important. And what is this UNFCCC? This UNFCCC is nothing but United Nations Framework on Climate Change. So this is UNFCCC, and this was signed in this summit. Now this UNFCCC became an umbrella charter or an umbrella document for many of the upcoming meetings, and this became very important. And the various COPs, that is Conference of Parties, that you study, the various COPs, Conference of Parties, occurred under this umbrella of UNFCCC. Be it the one in Kyoto, be it the one in Paris, all the various COPs have happened under this UNFCCC. Again, we'll be studying about this in more detail. Let us move towards the next conference now. So in 1994, the UNFCCC came into effect. Okay, though it was signed here, it came into effect in 1994. Then comes 1995, the first Conference of Parties, COP1, happened in UNFCCC. Then this is a very important timeline again, 1997, Kyoto COP. Okay, Kyoto COP happened, in which carbon trading mechanism was introduced. Carbon trading mechanism. Now, why is this important? For the first time, you can trade your carbon. For first time, it was seen that carbon is a polluting thing, and for first time, a monetary value, you may say, that a monetary value was attached to pollution. in Kyoto Protocol, a kind of monetary value was attached. And how did this work? I'm just telling this in brief now, and I will be telling in detail in future lectures. Suppose this is the first factory in red color. This one is polluting, the red one is polluting, and the green one is less polluting. This is more polluting, so its carbon is more. Okay, its carbon is more, and this is less polluting, its carbon is less. Its carbon is less. So what will happen is that this red factory can do two things. Either it can reduce its carbon, the pollution it is doing, or what it will do is that it will buy some carbon credits from this green factory. Carbon credits. If it is not able to reduce its pollution, and it will pay some amount, okay, rupees or dollars, it will pay some amount to the green factory, which is less polluting, so to get those carbon credits. And why it is purchasing carbon credits? Because it is not able to reduce its pollution beyond a certain level. So what is happening is that they are providing a monetary value in this 1997 Kyoto Conference of Party, COP, or Kyoto Protocol, that you will have a monetary value in terms of pollution. So the more you pollute, the more you will have to pay. So kind of polluter pay principle is presented in this conference. Okay, so I hope you understood this. Then in 2001, Marrakesh Accords happened, in which the Kyoto rules were finalized. Okay, so it finalized the Kyoto rules. Then 2002 Delhi Declaration. Now, as such, one may say that nothing much came out of Delhi Declaration, but there's a significance attached to it. What is the significance? That in Delhi Declaration, so I'm just Delhi, sorry for the spelling error. So in Delhi Declaration, what happened was that for the first time, developing countries, because this COP happened in India, for the first time, developing countries had a say in climate change matters. Until now, what was happening, that the developed countries were framing all the policies, and the developed countries were having all the say in the climate conferences. But for the first time, developing countries had some say in climate policies now. Also, developing countries took the lead, not wholly, but in some amount, took the lead in some amount. Okay, not wholly, but in some amount. You cannot say they took the lead wholly, but at least they took the lead in some amount, or in some way. They took the lead in some way to draft climate policies or to say something in climate matters. Okay, so they were taking the lead to voice their concern. This is the importance of Delhi Declaration, though nothing much came out of it. Okay, the conference was not a big of a success, but it is remembered because of the say of developing countries, and it happened in India. So that is why, again, it is important from our point of view that it happened in India. Okay, though not wholly the developing countries were not able to lead the climate change or the climate negotiations, but they started doing it in some way. Okay, they started doing it in some way, and little by little they begin to emerge in climate negotiations. Then we have 2005 Kyoto enforced and READ concept is introduced. So in 2005, whatever the negotiations of Kyoto happened, such as in 2001, the rules were made. So now what happened was that the Kyoto was enforced. The first period of Kyoto was enforced and carbon trading began. Now what is this READ and what is its concept? So READ, okay, so in this READ, what is happening is that suppose there's deforestation and degradation of forest. So due to this deforestation and degradation of forest, we are facing issues of climate change. Okay, climate change is not only happening due to pollution. What READ wants to say is that because of deforestation and degradation of forest, due to this also climate change is happening. And not only due to the fact that we are polluting. Okay, and this came in 2005 because at that time, especially the tropical countries such as Myanmar, then known as Burma, Myanmar, then known as Burma, were cutting down their forest at an alarming rate, because this Myanmar or Burma exports teak. Okay, this is one of the important trees or the exports of Myanmar, and it was exporting teak for various reasons, such as for furniture, etc. So these countries such as Burma were cutting down their forest at an alarming rate. In Indonesia also, in Indonesia, the forests were cut down for various plantations, such as for palm oil. For palm oil. So this led to alarming rate of deforestation, and that is why this READ concept was introduced. So this READ concept says that the climate change is also happening due to deforestation and forest degradation. Okay, so in this READ, what is happening is that in this READ, FAO, that is Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO provides assistance to various countries. It provides assistance to various countries to stop their deforestation. Okay, so this FAO, that is Food and Agriculture Organization, provides assistance to various countries for stopping deforestation and also for stopping their greenhouse gas emissions. So this is more or less what READ is about, but it is more concerned with forest degradation and deforestation. So these two, D stands for degradation. Let me write it again. These two, D stands for degradation and deforestation. And deforestation. Okay, so we'll be seeing about READ again in very detail, but it is again a very important concept. Okay, then Bali roadmap and READ is finalized. So this Bali is in Indonesia. So in this, the READ is finalized, that how READ will be there. Okay, what will be there. So all this is finalized, and a very important thing happened in the Bali roadmap was that there was a climate adoption fund. Climate adoption fund. This fund was established in the Bali conference. Okay, this is the first important thing. And one more thing happened was that the negotiations between Annex 1 countries under the Kyoto Protocol, Annex 1 countries under the Kyoto Protocol was carried out. Okay, so what is happening here is that in Bali, first thing was climate adoption fund was organized, or means established, and negotiations happened in between Annex 1 countries. Now what are these Annex 1 countries under Kyoto Protocol? This we'll be seeing again in very detail, but for now there are some countries which are Annex 1 countries in Kyoto Protocol, and between them negotiations was carried out in this Bali roadmap. All right, because there were certain issues, we will be reading about Kyoto Protocol in detail in upcoming lectures. Then in 2008, UN READ was finally it was finally adopted. Okay, so what the full form of this READ is? This READ stands for reducing emission from from deforestation, deforestation and forest degradation. This is the concept of READ, that you have to reduce emission from deforestation and forest degradation. And in 2008, this READ was finally adopted. Okay, there's one more concept that we will be seeing, READ plus, which we will be seeing in upcoming lectures. And India supports this READ plus and not READ as such. India does not support it. It supports this READ plus. And why it does, I'll be telling you in upcoming lecture. In 2008, REIT was established. Then in 2009, Copenhagen Summit took place. Now this Copenhagen Summit is again a very symbolic summit because here the countries, that is Brazil, South Africa, India and China, came together or banded together against the developed countries, especially USA. So there was nothing much in Copenhagen, but this basic idea or the concept of basic, that is Brazil, South Africa, India and China, was more or less established. These countries came together or banded together for their rights, because these countries say that we are developing countries and we do not have polluted this earth much, and USA and other developed countries should pay more for the climate change. So this conference more or less was about the responsibility, the differentiated responsibility that we hear about, common but differentiated responsibility, CBDR. It was all about this. In this, we have a common responsibility to save the climate, but differentiated one, because the countries such as USA, UK, Germany, they have polluted more. That is why they have more responsibility, a differentiated responsibility to save the climate. Then we have Cancun Summit. Now this is a very important summit. Cancun is in Mexico. Cancun is in Mexico, and this is a very important summit. In this summit, we had one of the most comprehensive. In 2010, we had the most comprehensive document which was signed. Most comprehensive document. This was signed for climate change till date. Signed for, I am writing climate change as CC, climate change till date. So till date, a most comprehensive ever agreed. Okay, this was agreed by all unanimously. Ever agreed, most comprehensive document ever agreed by all the governments. Comprehensive document signed, or you can write it here, ever agreed for climate change was signed till date on earth by the governments. Okay, and this was to help developing countries. To help developing countries. To help developing countries to fight against climate change. This was first thing. Many agreements were signed for climate change. Many agreements were signed for climate change. Okay. Some of the focus of this conference was adoption, mitigation. Then we had technology and finance. So I'm writing it here because of the space crunch. Finance. So these were the focus of this conference. So it was one of the most comprehensive documents signed for climate change till date, or which was ever agreed till date. First point. Then developing countries. It focused on how to help developing countries in climate change. Many new agreements were signed in climate change. Cancun is in Mexico, and it focused on adoption, mitigation, technology, and finance. One more important thing was that a green climate fund was created. A green climate fund was created at 2010 Cancun Summit. Okay, this is very important. This summit is again very important. We'll be seeing about all this summit in detail in upcoming lectures. Then we had Durban platform for action. So what will happen of Kyoto after 2020? So this Durban platform for action was focused on that after 2020, what will happen to Kyoto and its various agreements, because this Kyoto was enforced only for certain amount of time. Okay, this was enforced in 2005, but in 2005, it only contained a few countries, which were mostly developed countries. And developing countries were kept out of Kyoto Protocol. And it was agreed that after a certain period of time, developing countries will also be brought under Kyoto Protocol. So after 2020, what will we have to do of Kyoto? And in general, after 2020, in general, what will be our climate policies? What will be our climate policies after 2020? This was discussed here. That what was our climate policy? What will be our climate policy after 2020? This was discussed in Durban. And how to go about Kyoto, how to include various developing countries, such as big countries such as India and China, who have now started to pollute. in the climate actions and negotiations. Okay. Then we have Doha Summit of loss and damage. Now, this loss and damage is again a very important principle of Doha Summit 2012. And what does it say? Let me tell you. So, this loss and damage principle, this is denoted by LNS. So, what happens is that suppose there's a flood in some area. There's a flood in some area. Due to this flood, farmers will suffer some loss. Okay, farmers will suffer some loss. There will be a damage to infrastructure also. Okay, and there will be various loss and damages which will happen due to this uh, tragedy of flood. Okay, now this flood is happening due to climate change, or you can also say sea level rise. One of another thing is sea level rise. So this sea level rise is happening due to climate change, and this is causing certain amount of loss and damage in terms of money. This loss and damage is happening in terms of money. Okay, this is happening in terms of money. So, how to calculate this loss and damage due to climate change? How much monetary value should we attach to the climate change? That what is the amount of loss and damage happening to farmers, infrastructure, industries, etc. This was discussed, or this was firstly introduced in Doha Summit. Okay, so this loss and damage talks about the amount of loss which will happen due to climate change. Okay, such as there are small island nations. So these small islands nations will submerge due to rising sea level. So these will submerge due to sea level rise. So how to calculate their loss and damage and how to compensate them? This was firstly discussed in Doha. Then in Warsaw, loss and damage mechanism was formally introduced. Okay, loss and damage was formally introduced. And one more thing happened in Warsaw was that the read plus concept was introduced. This will be looking in more detail what is read plus, etc. This was introduced, and loss and damage was also formally introduced in Warsaw. Okay, we talked about loss and damage, how we can calculate it. All that happened in Warsaw along with read plus. Then we had Paris Agreement of 2015, a very historic agreement. We'll be studying about this in more detail. India also made various pledges. Various countries made various pledges. All the countries provided their NDC, that is nationally determined goal. Okay, that will be their nationally determined goals and how will they tackle climate change. All this was there in Paris Climate Agreement. A nice lecture will be taken on all that. Okay, so after Paris Agreement was done, then we had 2016 Marrakesh Summit, in which the fine print of Paris deal was discussed. That how Paris deal will be dealt. Okay, what are the principles that will be followed, and all this was discussed in Marrakesh Summit. Now we had again a very important, that is Bonn Summit. Now this Bonn Summit, this Bonn, although is located in Germany, but this conference was headed by Fiji. This conference was headed by Fiji, which is a small island nation. So in this, what happened was that Talona Dialogue was organized. So what is Bonn Summit? What is Talona Dialogue? Let us discuss this. Okay. So in Bonn Summit, first thing was that a national stock take. Okay, this national stock take was for the first time done in Bonn Summit, or the concept was taken in Bonn Summit. So what this stock take is all about? It is all about that how much is the GHG, greenhouse gas stock of a country, and how to calculate this GHG of a country. Okay, how to calculate that how much carbon is emitted from a factory or from a state or from a country. This is known as national stock take. That how nations have to collect their stock of greenhouse gases, or how they have to record their stock of greenhouse gases. This was discussed in Talona Dialogue. Not Talona Dialogue, but Bonn Summit. Now, what is this Talona Dialogue? Let us see this. Okay, I hope you understood what is this Bonn Summit is all about. That it was about national stock take, and national stock take talks about the greenhouse gas emission stock and how to keep their record for a country. Now, what is this Talona Dialogue? Let us talk about this in brief. So this Talona dialogue is nothing but a dialogue between various countries which asks them to create a dialogue or to discuss collective efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a dialogue between countries to discuss what collective efforts can be made to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a dialogue about how to reduce the collective efforts to reduce greenhouse gas. Okay, what collective efforts can be made, that was discussed to reduce greenhouse gas. This is the Talona dialogue. Okay, so this is more or less about the Bonn summit, which happened in Germany but was led by Fiji, and it talked about national stocktake. This again we'll be seeing in more detail. Then we have Katowice summit, so in which the Paris rules were finalized. So in Katowice summit, the Paris summit which happened in 2015, the rules of that summit were finalized, that what will be the rules of Paris. More or less it was finalized. Then we had Madrid summit, in which three aspects were discussed. Okay, so in this Madrid summit, three aspects were discussed. So what are those three aspects? Let us talk about them. First is unambitious action. Unambitious action. Unambitious action. What is this unambitious action? Is that many countries promise too much, but they don't deliver on that. Okay, that is unambitious action. Then we have unfulfilled financial commitments. Again, many countries commit too much, that they say we will donate this amount, we will donate that amount, but this remains unfulfilled. This is the second issue. First is what? That there's unambitious action, that countries announce too much, but they don't do anything. Second is unfulfilled financial commitments, that they do not fulfill their financial commitments, whatever the financial commitments they make. Third is carryover of certified emission reduction. Okay, certified emission reduction, GHG certificates. Okay, carryover of unsold certified emission reduction, GHG certificates. So I'm just writing unsold here. So the certificates, because whenever you reduce your emission, you will get a certificate that you have reduced your carbon emission. You will get a certificate that you have reduced your carbon emission, and now you can trade that certificate. But what is happening is that many of the certified emission reduction or the emission reduction GHG certificates are lying around. Okay, they are unsold. So what to do of those unsold certificates which are there in the market, which are there, how to trade them, who will provide money for them. So all these three aspects were discussed. Okay, carryover of unsold certified emission reduction. Carryover of unsold certified emission reduction, that is the greenhouse gas certificate. Then after Madrid's three aspects, we have Glasgow summit or the Glasgow Climate Pact, which recently happened in 2021. So this Glasgow summits talk about accelerating climate action climate action in this decade. Climate action in this decade. To talk about how can we accelerate the climate action that we are taking in this decade. And one more thing is that the principle of Panchamrit, let me rewrite it again here. Panchamrit was given by our current Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, in this summit. Okay. So in this summit, principle of Panchamrit was given by our current Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, and it talked about accelerating climate action in this decade, that how we can accelerate climate action in this decade. It talks about this. Okay. And now after this, we had this last conference of 2022, which happened in Sharm el Sheikh. This is located in Egypt. Okay. So this Sharm el Sheikh talks about the second global stock take. Second global stock take. Okay, first we have seen here, and this stock takes will happen after every 5 years. We'll study this in more detail, but after every 5 years, stock take will happen. So this Sharm el Sheikh talks about the second global stock take which will happen. Okay, first thing is that. And it also talks about to provide loss and damage assistance to vulnerable countries. To provide loss and damage assistance to vulnerable countries. So I'm just writing VC here, to vulnerable countries. Provide loss and damage assistance to vulnerable countries, that whatever the damage they face due to climate change, whatever loss is happening to them, so how can we provide assistance to those countries which are vulnerable to climate change? So this is there in Sharm el Sheikh. Now this 2023 COP will happen. Okay, the agenda of this 2023 COP has not been discussed till now. Till now we have studied till 2022. Okay, so this again, all the conferences will be looking in much detail in upcoming lectures. I've just given you a brief overview so that you understand how the various climate policies were formed. Okay, what were the various ways in which the climate change emerged, how it became the main point in 1972. It started with Stockholm Conference, then in 1992 Rio Earth Summit, and how it reached Paris Summit and all that. So I hope you must have understood a good amount. By a good amount, now we'll be seeing this in detail in next lecture. We'll be starting with the very first, that is the 1972 Stockholm Conference. Here you can see the photo of Indira Gandhi participating in that conference. A very important conference it was. So we'll be seeing all that in the upcoming lectures. So I hope you like this. So thank you very much for this lecture.